So today I begin with some good news. Maybe you need some of that good news. For those who long for 2020 to simply be over, I am pleased to announce that the next Sunday is the final Sunday of our Christian calendar year. You may remember that the Christian calendar doesn't track exactly with January 1 as the new year. We have seasons. The liturgical season, if you can kind of see this, the first day of the Christian year, calendar year, is the first Sunday of Advent. That's November 29th. That means next Sunday is the last Sunday of the year, Christ the King Sunday. So we celebrate the reign of Jesus Christ, the kingship of Christ at the end of the year, the eternal kingship of Christ. But that's it. Next Sunday is the last Sunday of the Christian calendar 2020. So you can perhaps rejoice in that, the last Sunday of the year. But what if it's the last day? What if next Sunday is the last day? The last day of all things. What the Old Testament calls the day of the Lord, and the New Testament sees as the second coming of Jesus Christ. What if the last day is next Sunday? You know, it could be. It's as likely a day as any other. Maybe more likely, given all the things we've experienced this year. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Christ. We're going to celebrate the end of the Christian calendar year next Sunday, but what if it's the last day? The day of the Lord. So we're coming upon a season of preparation. Advent is a season of preparation, of getting ready to remember and to welcome again the birth of the Christ child. November 29th, the beginning of Advent, the remembrance of the first arrival of Jesus. But during Advent, we also emphasize that while we remember the first arrival of Jesus, we also anticipate the second coming of Jesus, the day of the Lord, the end of all that we know, and the beginning of something we can only imagine. The day of the Lord. What if it's next Sunday? But today, on this day, the Sunday before the end of the Christian year, rather than consider the second coming in the context of Advent or the first coming, we consider today before the end, before the King is celebrated next week on Christ the King Sunday. Today, we consider the possibility of the weight, the dread, and the glorious nature of the day of the Lord. The Old Testament speaks a lot about the day of the Lord. Joel, the prophet, calls it that dreadful time, that dreadful day. The New Testament speaks of the second coming in both expressions of the same thing. It is a day of judgment. A dreadful day for some. A glorious day for the children of God. And so we look today at 1 Thessalonians. Paul writing to new Christians, which is always so instructive to all of us. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 1 to 11. Now, brothers and sisters, about times and dates, we do not need to write to you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Bold words from Paul. We often look to the Bible for comfort and encouragement like a warm hug. Sometimes the Bible is a slap in the face, a wake-up call to what is urgent and important and the real priorities of life. Paul getting right to it. Here's what is the most important: to be awake, alert, and prepared for the day of the Lord, which is surely coming. Now, it's important to know that the Bible only gives a scant picture of what the day of the Lord is. People turn to Revelation and want to be able to say, well, I can tell, here's what's happening now, and that's an indication of what's going to come soon. And then there have been so many people who've said, this is the day, this is the day, this is the date, this is the time, you better be ready because it's going to happen then. And then they're wrong. And then they figure out a new formula for saying, well, now it's really going to be this day and this time. Jesus says, be awake, alert, and prepared. Because you're never going to know whether it's a week from now, a year from now, or 5 minutes from now. Paul in 1 Thessalonians getting right to it. But the Bible only gives us a scant picture. We don't know very much. It's not a literal image in the Bible that we're given. It's something more like a stock photo. Are you familiar with stock photos? Here's a stock photo I found. And no, this is not an earlier picture of the Hughes family. This is a stock photo. These are models. This is an approximation of a beautiful young family. That's something of what the Bible is doing with the day of the Lord, with the end of time. You get a stock photo. You get something that approximates what will happen. But you don't get a clear, literal picture. So we need to spend less time trying to figure out what day and what time, and instead just be awake, alert, and prepared for it to be the very next moment. That's the Bible teaching. Not to try and spend all of our time trying to figure out what's the literal meaning, time, date, action of the day of the Lord. The Bible gives us something of a stock photo. Nevertheless, as you know, people still seek to know literally when, where, and what the day of the Lord will be. Jesus is purposefully opaque. We are not to know when, where, or what the second coming will be. He emphasizes this in Mark 13. Jesus says this, but about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven. We don't know. So all we can do is be awake, alert, and prepared. That's it. We don't get to know. Paul and Jesus say that he will come suddenly. But no one should be caught unaware or unprepared. Jesus makes it perfectly clear. I'm coming again. No doubt about it. So So we have plenty of time to be awake, alert, and prepared. We should be ready right now. Paul writes with a difference between the night and the light. The people of the night, of darkness. It's a condition of being unaware and unprepared. The people who live in darkness. John's Gospel says the people who live in darkness have seen a great light with the coming of Jesus. The problem is that for some, that light never quite shined enough for them, and they continue to live in darkness. Paul says that darkness, that shadow, is the condition of being unaware and unprepared. But what about the people of the light, of the daytime? Paul says they are aware and they are prepared. He's talking about the state of the believer and the unbeliever. The state of the believer is to be aware, alert, awake, sober. The state of the unbeliever is to be unaware, unprepared, drunk, under the influence of something other than the Spirit of God. There's the contrast between the two. Where are we on our spiritual journey? Raise your hand if you've ever been in an earthquake. I'm just kind of curious how many people. It's about half. Chris and I, right after we got married, we lived through the Northridge earthquake in Southern California. 6.7. Literally rocked the Southland. This picture that you're looking at is a 3-story apartment building. But what do you notice? That second floor balcony is only a few feet off the ground. This building collapsed on itself, crushing the first floor under the weight of a 6.7 earthquake. It was a terrible experience. We were awoken in the middle of the night with the whole world shaking, it seemed like. There's nothing, I think, like an earthquake to remind you, to remind us, we don't have the control we think we do. When the very foundation that you're standing on, you can't trust. And I'm reminded of this all the time. We fight so hard against the coronavirus, and we should. But at the same time, it forces us to recognize there's only so much that we can do. There's only so much control we can exert on life. That at a certain point, we don't have the control that we wish we did or that we think we do. And an earthquake is a remarkable reminder, a fearful reminder, that what we think we can trust, what we think we can control, is not all that stable underneath us. We have to learn to live with that. That's a part of our spiritual growth. That's a part of growing in peace with the knowledge of a sovereign God. That even though the ground beneath us shakes, God is unmovable. But an earthquake can literally rock our world. Fortunately, when the Northridge quake hit, Chris and I were living in a house in Sierra Madre, which is up along the foothills, so the ground our home was built on was granite. And the house really shook. But we had already put little latches on our cabinets. You can kind of see a picture of one. And so even though we heard our new wedding china rattling in the cabinets, they stayed closed and nothing ended up on the floor. We had put latches on our drawers so they couldn't fly open and dump everything on the floor. We had bolted bookcases to the wall, including the television stand. So even though the house shook, we didn't have any damage. We also prepared 3 trash cans full of supplies. We had tons of food, we had cash in the house, we had all kinds of batteries and flashlights and barbecue, charcoals, we had everything. And so even though this quake rocked our world, we'd been prepared. We only hung soft stuff over chairs and over our bed so nothing could fall and damage people. We were prepared. And so even though it was a frightening moment, we knew we'd done what we could, and we were ready. We were at peace. before the earthquake as much as can be, and after. Paul indicates the second coming will be something like an earthquake. It will be something we will never know. It will be something that shakes our foundation. It will be something that will rock our world. Paul then shifts to the behavior of the believer. First he says, this is your state of being, people of the light or people of the night, people aware and alert or people asleep and drunk. The behavior of the believer. The believer is awake, spiritually, alert, sober, clear-minded, ready to serve, ready to hear God's call, aware of the evidence for God's existence and the need to act. The unbeliever is asleep and dull, drunk under the influence of something other than the Spirit. And then Paul says, between night and day, between believer and unbeliever, between belief and unbelief, it is something of a battle. And he says, put on faith and love. Put on faith and love like a breastplate, something like a catcher's breastplate. And then he says, put on the helmet of hope. So there you go. Real solid equipment to aid us in our spiritual growth, to aid us in our battle between night and day, light and darkness. And it is a battle. The chest protector and the catcher's helmet allows the catcher to go into battle. Paul speaks of spiritual battle, the helmet of hope, the breastplate of faith and love, tools with which to battle for our spiritual growth. It's a constant battle. Unbelieving culture wants the state of your being to be unaware and unprepared by distracting you with celebrity and sports. Our unbelieving culture says, be uninformed, be emotional, not rational, drink deeply of meaninglessness, have an attitude of, who cares, we'll do it tomorrow. Light and dark, awake and asleep. Unbelieving culture wants your behavior to be obedient to the culture, obedient to power, be material, not spiritual, be demanding, not giving, be angry, not joyful. Light and dark, belief and unbelief. Life. Ultimately, despite what seems to be our striving for safety, there is no safety, only preparation. We must, as Christians, be awake, alert, and prepared. If you aren't ready, I advise you to get ready. Come out of the shadows, come out of the gray area into the full light. Get prepared now, not tomorrow, not when the football season is over, not when you finally have enough time, but now, because certain things cannot be left to the last moment. It's too late to properly prepare for an examination just hours before the test. It's too late to properly service the car when you're broken down on the side of the road. Some things must be done ahead of time. The earthquake of the second coming is on its way. We know that to be certain. The earthquake of the second coming is on its way. We don't know when, but we should be prepared. Bolt your faith to the wall so that it cannot be shaken. Put latches on your heart so it can't be thrown to the floor. Fill up every inch of who you are with the resources of the Spirit. Build up a supply of faith to last a lifetime. we can be awake, alert, and prepared, and at peace with the coming day of the Lord. It's kind of like the story of the old Scotsman on his deathbed. The chaplain enters and says to the man, "Shall I read you some words from the Bible?" "No need," the Scotsman thundered. "I prepared my house for the storm when it was warm." We need to be awake, alert, and prepared for the glorious day of the Lord.